Microphone. Hi everyone, and welcome to this Loops event. Thank you for all of you guys for joining us. It's nice to see so many people here tonight. My name is Sara. My name is Sara, and I'm a master's student at the program Design and Computation at TU Berlin and UDK Berlin. I'm going to be moderating tonight's edition together with Justus from Princeton University. Him and his colleagues are part of Deborah Amos's class, International Reporting Investigative Journalism. For those joining us for the first time, Loops is our public event series here at New Practice, initiated within the Berlin University Alliance and now supported by the Projekt Zukunft of the State of Berlin. Each session invites guests from different disciplines to share their work, exchange ideas, and open discussions on art, design, technology, and society. Tonight's edition, called War and Truth, is a special collaboration between New Practice and Princeton University. It's going to bring together journalists, artists, researchers to reflect on how truth is processed, mediated, and challenged in times of conflict and migration. We're going to look at how journalism, art, research can work together to develop forms of accountable storytelling and how images, testimonies, and data can shape what becomes visible, sayable, and knowable in the public sphere. So the structure of today is going to be that we're going to have a few short introductions from each of our guests, followed by a moderated discussion, and then, as well as Q&A by the audience. And you can see the loops in the middle here. It's going to indicate when each round has finished, so you can follow the course of the discussion. And now I'm very pleased to introduce our first guest tonight, Dr. Anna Polze. Anna is a postdoc researcher in media studies. She works at the Collaborative Research Center Virtual Life Worlds at Ruhr University Bochum. Anna has received her doctorate in 2024 with her dissertation written within the Bochum-based research training group, Documentary Practices. Her area of interest are digital moving images cultures, forensic media, and visual evidence such as forensic architecture, borders, and migration. Her research examines how media technologies and digital archives influence our understanding of evidence and witnessing, particularly within contexts of displacement and border politics. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Anna to start her talk.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction and also for the invitation to this lovely event and this nice room. I've been here the first time, so it's nice to be here. When I was invited, I was thinking, how could I contribute to this field of new practice in art and technology? Because as a media scholar and working in the humanities, my practice actually is just writing. So what I brought is my book, that I've written, and that was published by the end of last year. I also have a copy in my hand. So. I wanted to introduce you to the topics that I discussed in this book and also address maybe some questions and points for the discussion. So, and the book is basically on the fragility of evidence, so that's also the title, Fragile Evidenz, and it's the outcome of my PhD. So if you think about evidence in digital cultures, I think what first comes into mind are hundreds and thousands of images. They are shared via Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter, or have been shared via Twitter. They are uploaded on YouTube, and sometimes they are generated or altered using AI, but often they come just from the smartphones that people carry around all day. There are comments, hashtags, likes, and other platform operations that can amplify the meaning of a single image and make it go viral. But of course, that an image goes viral doesn't mean that it would be treated as evidence in a court of human rights, for example, or that it would serve as an information in the news. The lasting presence of smartphone footage in our media ecology leads to a new practice of making, seeing, assessing, evaluating, trusting, and also distrusting images. And that's all what has to do with the question of visual evidence in the contemporary condition. Especially in the cases of human rights issues, smartphones serve as a crucial infrastructure and important means of evidence production. So you all might be familiar with videos that have been shared in the context of Black Lives Matter, for example, when police violence was made visible via smartphone videos that have been uploaded to social media. And while this ubiquity of smartphone imagery has contributed to new forms of visual representation and also claims of evidence, there are a lot of cases, also a lot of struggles that are not so easily represented using smartphones. And also, and often it's prohibited also to produce evidence using smartphones. And this is a case that I dealt with in my book. So one example where you can find a struggle in this condition of smartphone documents being omnipresent and being like the most vernacular document you would see nowadays are pushbacks at the border, at the European borders. So I think most of you might be familiar with what pushbacks are, but I can briefly explain that it's an illegal practice by state or police operations forcing asylum seekers to return just after they cross the border. But normally, if you would cross the border, the police would be, it would be their job to have an asylum process, and they would ask you if you want to apply for asylum, but in these cases, you wouldn't be asked, but just forced to go back. And this is illegal, and this is violating a lot of rights, and actually just the human right of non-refoulement and international laws. But nevertheless, there have been a lot of cases, more than thousands of different cases in different regions of the EU borders, like, for example, in the Mediterranean, but also at the border between Poland and Belarus, and at the border of Greece and Turkey. And there are a lot of NGOs, for example, Human Rights Watch, but also the Border Violence Monitoring Network, that have done a great job in collecting testimonies of a lot of cases, and every testimony exactly revealed that it's the same procedure of pushbacks. And often the people also told that they lost their smartphones during the pushback. So the smartphones were, for example, they were thrown into rivers, in the sea, they were destroyed. So people were actually, by the police, prohibited from making evidence and also publishing the evidence. So an important infrastructure of digital evidence production is lost when the smartphone is broken. So it's very easy, actually, but it has a lot of consequences. So this is what I was asking myself. How would you document a pushback if you don't have smartphone material? And how would you make it visible if you cannot use social media or if it's just very restricted? And so what I did in my book was like, I would describe my methodology as small data research. It's an analysis of actually just one investigation by the London-based research agency Forensic Architecture that you might be familiar with. I hope everybody's familiar, because I won't go into detail about Forensic Architecture's work in general, but we can do that, of course, in the discussion. So I wrote my book about one case that took place at the border of Turkey and Greece. And that's about a small group who was actually able to produce some smartphone footage just before their phones were confiscated. So they shared their locations when they crossed the border and were in Greece, but they could actually not document the whole pushback. So they didn't make any videos or photos of the police operations, but they shared their location, which indicated that they actually had been on European ground. And my question in the book is, what can this particular case actually teach us about this structural condition of evidence in the digital, and also on this broader context of the border of this European Union? I understand this particular case, but also the methods that Forensic Architecture has used as symptoms. So they are used this way as part of a larger context and a larger structural situation. You could also call this a precedential case or a test case, because it shows a lot of the political context, and it's not just a single case, but it's a case that stands as an example for very, very more cases and that could be described in the same way. In my book, I did a close reading of this investigation by Forensic Architecture, which is a video of about 10 minutes, so actually a very short piece. But I wanted to show via looking at the infrastructures that led into this research, and that also led into the research Forensic Architecture did, but also on the evidence production by the migrants themselves, how you could actually prove this larger situation and make it understandable. So following Judith Butler, for example, I wanted to understand the infrastructural dependencies of contemporary evidence production. So it was, my interest is in the conditions of making things sayable and visible, and not only about the content and about what you can see and what you can show, but what actually are the possibilities and how are these possibilities shaped, who gets access to what kind of infrastructure and media, and who is prohibited from that access. And now I'm going to show like some pages from the book, and just as a note, there are text in German, but you don't have to read it. It's also too small, I guess. So it's more about the images, which are screenshots from the investigation, but I wanted to show also like how I published it and how this text and image combination is put into practice here. So here we see a screenshot from Twitter, which was the initial material that the investigation took. So we see 3 images and some text on them, and these are the materials the immigrants produced when they entered Greece. So it's photos indicating a special location. It's also a pin, like a shared location at a special place. It's also a short video message, which indicates also that the group has crossed the border and that they are afraid of experience a pushback. And then some comments and also some linkings and likings, but not so much. So if you would see this posting on Twitter, it didn't get so much attention. And what you can see, or what you can learn also from this screenshot actually, is that this infrastructure of Twitter, or the platform of Twitter, has also like a lot of, can give a lot of influence on how this material is actually seen or who gets to see it. So it hasn't gone viral, and it hasn't reached a lot of audiences. Some people commented below it that it might be not true, so that's also a reaction that you would also often get in social media, that people wouldn't believe if you post something, or they would question if it's true or not. Also, the platform, as you all know, is not a neutral place. It's owned by a capitalist economy, and it's part also of what you can see and what you cannot see on the platform. And also, on the smaller level, you would also see that the migrants on the images, they didn't post these photos themselves, but they had people and friends who did it for them. So there's also the smaller network of people helping and producing evidence for someone else. So it's not this direct photo you took on your phone and uploaded, but it's also a combination of different people working together on that. And it's not always visible who works together and who does what at what point. So this is like, for me, an insight into an important infrastructure of migrant mobility and also migrant documentation, these social media platforms. But also, as you know, Twitter is not the place it used to be back in 2020 when this material is posted there. It's still visible on the platform, but I, for example, don't use it anymore, Twitter, and I think also for a lot of people who are working in human rights and wanting to claim accountability, it's not the place it has been like some years ago. That's also always to consider, I would say, how is this infrastructure actually changing by someone acquiring it and changing a lot of this policy there. This is now one screenshot of the investigation by Forensic Architecture. It's kind of at the end of the video, and it shows a diagram of the border region. It's the region at the Evros River, so it's a land border of Greece and Turkey, not at the sea. And you can see different points on this map. So it shows actually where the border is, but it shows also different locations of border guard stations, detention centers, and actually a prison where the asylum seekers were brought after their pushback. So this is kind of an insight into the infrastructure of the border itself, about the border regime and about the regime of the European Union. You could use this diagram, and that's why I think it's important. It's a diagram that's also schematic, so it's not just a diagram for this particular case, although it's made out of this case, but it's also an abstraction that you could also use for different cases, and that is explaining the situation on a structural level. So you don't need to have one person standing up and saying, I experienced this or that. You can show also a diagram that makes it more visible and more abstract, but also more relatable for different cases. So it's also important to get a situation or perspective like this when talking about evidence, that you shift your perspectives and also see more structural levels and more broader context that you can see, for example, using a diagram. And now the last, for example, I wanted to bring is this. So this is like a spread page. It's actually from another investigation by forensic architecture. I think that's well known. It's about the NSU case in Kassel back in 2016. The case was 2006, sorry. And this investigation was from 2017. But what I looked into in this chapter is not just this, the investigation or the case, but it's actually the black background of this video file. So I was interested in what is this black background doing for helping us getting a new sense of the material. So how is it arranged there and why is it a black background? You often have this black backgrounds in the videos by forensic architecture. They are kind of a new table, I would say, or a new space where you can put the evidence material on. So it's always important, where is the material you find or you see put on and how is it presented there? And this kind of table, as I would call it, is also a contact zone. So it's a place where people meet virtually maybe, but also in real life. If you shift this video table to the table in the exhibition space, for example. So in the exhibition space, the table becomes a space for an arrangement of materials in an aesthetic way. It's a place for gathering. It's a place for people to come to, look into that, spend time there. But also the table, in a different notion, has an important place in the court of law. So at the table, you would in court, you would put a piece of evidence. The judges can see it. They can have time to discuss it. It's a neutral space, so it's a space in the middle between different parties that would talk about it. And finally, the third dimension of the table is the table as the space of research, for researchers sitting at it, having time, having a moment to order things, get a new understanding. So this is, I think, an important kind of small infrastructure of forensic research, but also forensic presentation in the exhibition space, but also in the office. And it's a nice way to see how virtual or digital spaces and actual analog places can intersect. So I see, yeah, time is running up. What I wanted to say maybe finally is like an appeal maybe, so not only to look at images as content and what you can see in them and what they say to you, but also look at the backside and the infrastructures and the tables they're on. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And I would like to now give the chance for short questions to the audience, like questions of understanding, or if you didn't hear something or you want a definition, because we have the bigger discussion later on. So yeah, we'll take 2 questions. No questions, I think? You?
I'm just curious how you came across that video.
Am I on? Thank you for asking. So actually it was on Twitter during the pandemic. So when I was starting my research, it was 2019, and I just went to this new situation in Bochum, to my new job. And half a year later, I spent my time at home, and all the information I got came from social media. So also this video was posted there first. And actually, I think it also informed my research because I got an understanding about the importance of social media at that time, but also now, of course. Thanks.
I actually have a short question as well. It's also about the video, but I was wondering how this video, what effect it had in court, and in general, videos that come from smartphones, how they're viewed in court, and what the procedure is in that case.
So thank you for asking, because that's an interesting a special case in this investigation, because when I finished my book, and I think like some days later, I stumbled across a statement by the Court of the European Union, of the Court of Human Rights, that this case actually was successful. So it took a lot of time, like over 5 years, but it is the first pushback that was actually successful in court, like the claims were successful. It went through different courts. So the first court, I think it was the Turkish court, they rejected it. The Greek court, of course, sorry. The Greek court rejected it, but then they filed it again with the help of different lawyers. And it took a lot of time, but it was successful in the end. But also it's kind of sad also to learn, because what came out was that the Greek government had to pay a fee of 20,000 euros. So it's money in the end. So it's not that you would say the jurisdiction can actually help the structural problem of border migration issues. It's more that it's also at the end kind of symbolic, but also important for other cases to follow. So in this particular case, you could observe how these documents actually were successful in court, because they could be verified by different cross-referencing other materials also. And normally, I think it's always a question how valid the metadata of smartphone documents are. Often metadata is lost when materials are sent via WhatsApp, for example, or other messengers, and also you cannot prove after sending a file that it hasn't been altered in the meantime. So you would have to prove like every step of the document that it took from, I don't know, having it made by the phone until it is on the table of the court, that every step is verified. And it's very difficult using digital media, but there are new tools that are developed also by NGOs that would help you like making these records of the documents.
Oh, thank you. With that, to Justus.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next guest is Fred Abrams, researcher, writer, and guest faculty in human rights at Bard College in Berlin. He spent nearly 3 decades at Human Rights Watch, serving as a researcher, director, and senior manager with a focus on conflict, technology, and investigative methodology. Fred's work bridges journalism, human rights documentation, and field investigation. Over the years, he has contributed to major cases of human rights advocacy, revealing how rigorous documentation could lead to legal accountability and public awareness. Welcome, Mr. Abrams.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind introduction. More than I sent, so you did some work on that. Yeah, I'm really glad to be here because first of all, it's very interesting as a human rights practitioner to hear about the work of scholars who review our work, and I really appreciate that, and we can learn a lot. And you know, when I was at Human Rights Watch for a long time, we're constantly with our nose down and grinding through to pump out a press release or a report. So it's really important to stop and step back and talk in an interdisciplinary manner, which I understand to be the purpose or one of the purposes of this Loops series. So I really welcome that. I wanted to say, my surprise. I was supposed to come slowly. I think I leaned on the, anyway. So to begin, I wanted to highlight 3 principles when I think about reporting. And for me, it's human rights reporting, but it also is journalistic reporting. And I know Professor Deb Amos is here with her students. It's the same. I think there's similarities. There are differences I'll mention, but there are similarities. So one of the principles is a commitment to accuracy. So that's rigorous research, rigorous investigations, rigorous fact-finding to get as close as possible to the truth. The second is independence, so that we work without fear or favor. And that means what we choose to cover and also what we choose not to cover, right? And every decision involves choices that we're not looking at. And that can say a lot. And I have some examples maybe in the conversation relevant to Germany on that regard. And the third is transparency. So as best as possible, we are making clear how we gathered the facts and how we reached conclusions. So the methods are clear, and then consumers can decide. Did we make the case or not, or what questions do they have? So I think these hold true no matter what kind of report you do, if it's analog or digital. Right, but it's a common theme, common goals and common principles. So if I think about those principles connected to aesthetics and the presentation of findings, then a few issues come to my mind. And the first point I want to make is that it's really important to have this conversation because the aesthetics, the presentation, the visualization of findings is far more relevant today than it was years before. And that was supposed to be my first slide. It's an old report. It's actually even called Helsinki Watch. That's what the precursor to Human Rights Watch. And that's what the reports looked like when I started. That's actually a little before I started. But, that's the report. And, on the aesthetics, maybe we could debate the font, the margin size. I guess there's a logo of sorts there. But this report was literally stapled, printed and stapled, right? So, and today we're looking, as Anna showed us, at such a deeper, richer, and wider array of techniques, right? So we're involving open source research, photos, videos, 3D modeling, and now, AI-assisted research that brings, lots of opportunities and challenges. And the other point here is that people consume information differently today, and it's a far more visual world. So reports like this will not get many clicks. They won't get a lot of attention. So you have to meet people where they are. You have to communicate findings in ways that people will receive them, and you'll achieve what you're trying to achieve. So, if I think about that, then how these how this plays out, these principles with aesthetics, there are a couple of questions or issues. Maybe I don't have answers. Maybe you'll have the answers. Yeah. So one of them is the commitment to accuracy, right? So does the presentation accurately represent what we have found, what you have found? And that includes the limitations on the data, right, to use a statistician's term. The other is whether the content is clear, right, and is it absorbable? And I'll come to that as one of the risks, because I think there is a risk of getting too wrapped up in the design and losing focus on the purpose. I guess good design the purpose is embedded in good design. And the third is it engaging? Okay, and one word I want to use here is does it get your attention, or does it move you? And I just want to rest for a moment on that word move or motion. Because not in the motion graphic sense, but one of the main goals, I would say the main goal of human rights reporting is to move you. And that may be emotional movement, so you move somebody to empathy, or it may be a political movement that you nudge an institution to do something. Right? You want a law changed. You want someone released from prison. You want someone put in prison, right? So human rights reporting has a goal, right? It has a purpose, and reports are always a vehicle. And that's a key difference with journalism, right, where the reporting is the goal itself, right? Now that's changing, and I know Deb could speak more to that. But now you're seeing public interest journalism, nonprofit journalism, accountability journalism, and that more closely aligns with human rights reporting because you're looking to change something, right? But traditional journalism is about reporting, right? And then you're done, right? There's no campaigns after it. You don't track whether something happened. So the conversation that I always had. Oh, never mind. I missed all my slides. Doesn't matter. I think I got too excited. What happened? Oh yeah, these were examples of the newer versions. This is actually from, I think, Forensic Architecture and Amnesty. This is Sednaya prison in Syria, which remarkably, they did this a few years ago when no one could have access to Sednaya by interviewing prisoners who had been there and reconstructing the prison. Now, of course, people have gone there and visited this site. It's well, liberated is too far, I think, to say, given what is happening in Syria. But, and then this is just another example. This was a research project we did at Human Rights Watch. It's a 3D model from a drone flight. Actually, this is over Syria as well. This was a reported mass grave, and we flew a drone over it. Anyway, these were just to give you some examples of how far we've come. But what I wanted to say, so I don't lose all of my brilliant points. Oh yes, when I was having conversations with my former colleagues at Human Rights Watch, so we produced a lengthy investigation, and then we sit with the web designers and the graphic designers and the content creators who are in-house because it's a large NGO. The question we would always ask is, does this move us forward, right? Sure, it looks amazing, right? And but does it get us closer to where we want to go and what we're trying to achieve? So I think I guess the way I would put it is that successful design is not so much about form and more about content. Although, well, I'll be interested in those two are related, so maybe you can say something about that. But that for me. Aesthetics are functional and ethical more than decorative, which doesn't mean I don't appreciate decoration. I deeply do. If you can have all three, you're really hitting it right. But that, I'll close here, is one of the risks that I see, which relates to the research side and the presentation side, for lack of a better. Which is, I do see in this process, which you covered in your book, there is a danger of us getting too blinded by the golden light, right? Which means today we can use satellite imagery and remote sensing. We can use drones. We have 3D modeling. We can use AI in very creative and effective ways, right? And on presentation, obviously, there's lots of sophisticated ways to present data and information. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And I do see a trend sometimes that we get wrapped up in the potential and the creative and the beauty and the glamour, and we lose track of the goal. And at least from the human rights perspective, the goal is always to use this product and this work as a means to an end. Right? So I think I'll stop there and look forward to talking more. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. If there's any questions from the audience, we can take those now. Just raise your hand. Sarah.
Hey, I have a question. We've seen a few years ago that the aesthetics of modern NGO reporting and human rights violation reporting, as done by Forensic Architecture, but also taken in general by many NGOs thereafter, have been taken by perpetrators of human rights violations to attempt to justify their crimes, because the aesthetic is good and works in the mind of the consumers, and as such has been used. And for a very practical example, this has been used by the Israeli Defense Force to illustrate justifications of tunnels being under a hospital, for example, for the reason of bombing a hospital. And while the aesthetics is taken from human rights investigations, the research procedure is not, of course, as has been reported. What is your approach to this aesthetic becoming a tool for human rights violators?
Yeah, good question. No one has a monopoly on the use of these tools. So all actors, good and bad, will do it. And I think what you're right is we are seeing a new situation. It's a couple years. It's not new, where we have to critique and sometimes debunk so-called reporting or presentations by malicious actors, right? Or dishonest actors, or actors who are trying to present their version of a story or their propaganda or their narrative, right? So there is a need, and there is a growing, this is a field, actually. This is a field. I mean, it's kind of it's related to the disinformation field, right? Where, a video gets posted and there are teams like the BBC has a whole team that only verifies content. Often it's like a video, and has it been AI generated, and they will determine that this video is fake, right? But also human rights organizations are beginning to look at this. There's a very good organization called a Citizen Lab, if anyone is familiar with that. It's at the University of Toronto, and they do excellent work on this. They just released a report about, you mentioned Israeli propaganda, about Evin prison. There was an attack on Evin prison, and there were very quickly videos put out about the attack, which Citizen Lab researched and found were fake, and put out there to mix the pot, distract, stir up. Actually, I think they were trying to provoke a kind of uprising in Iran. That was the theory of the thing. So the answer is yes. I mean, we have to be on the, let's call it, the counter offensive, if you will.
Question over here. Could you possibly talk about the struggle inside the NGO between important and moving? Because you said you want to have you want to move the consumer, as you called it, which I find a quite problematic world. I'd rather have citizens, but there seems to be this conflict between important and moving, I mean, like in the old times of Greenpeace, when they chose to target whales as the main vehicle to talk about, environmental problems, because whales had this huge following, they were cute and beautiful and unique and so on, whereas a lot of other animals, for example, didn't have this same pull factor. Maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, first, I totally accept the point. I mean, it's a consumer is let's say, not a very, it's a pejorative almost, not a very helpful term. So I take that to heart. I'm not sure exactly what the question was, though, in terms of, I mean, how we find ways, like the whale, to best communicate a...
No, I mean, how do you solve this basically contradiction between what's important and what's most moving,
Oh, I see. Yeah, right. Yeah. That is, there's a tension. Like I can't honestly give you an answer to that because it's so subjective and circumstantial, and it's a judgment call, right? What I would say is, usually in any project, any report, if it's digital or analog, or you need to articulate as best as possible your goals. What exactly are you trying to achieve? That may be move public opinion. I mean, that's a legitimate goal, right? And then when you've identified that goal, you make decisions to best, meet it, right?
All right, up to our final two presenters.
Yes, we're gonna go over to Engy El-Shenawy and Federico Zurani, artists and researchers based in Berlin. Their collaborative work explores the politics of images, digital evidence, and the aesthetics of war and witnessing, focusing particularly on simulation and investigative visual practices. Their projects often engage with the blurred boundaries between representation and reconstruction, asking how simulations, archives, and artistic reenactments can both expose and complicate the search for truth. Please welcome Engy and Federico.
Thank you, Sara, for the warm welcome, and thank you for the amazing input by our speakers. We're very happy to be here today and talk about our work. Our work is in the realm of fiction, documentary, evidence, and authority, and we started this work like 2 years ago. And before we talk about our work in 2 years, we also wanted to mention that in these 2 years we've been witnessing a lot of war happening everywhere in the world, like in the Ukraine, Syria, Yemen, Congo, and other places, and the genocide in Palestine, which is also related to our work. And we started this project right after October 7th. And we wanted to start by a quote by Jean-Luc Godard, who once quipped that whereas the genre of Israel was the epic, fantasy, legend, and myth, the genre of Palestine was the documentary, facts, law, and metric. And whether we agree with this statement or not, it raises a lot of questions, and we start questioning what it means like to have the privilege of being the imaginary, or to have to show facts and metrics for a living.
Okay, so also thank you by me, and I'm pretty excited to start this conversation, especially because like all your slides kind of prepared what we're going to show now, and we wanted to start this talk by showing two video simulation. One is by IDF and the other one is by forensic architecture, but let's go.
This is southern Lebanon. There are dozens of Lebanese villages along approximately 80 kilometers of the border with Israel. For over 20 years, Hezbollah has deployed its arms, such as cruise missiles, rockets, launchers, and explosive UAVs inside civilian homes hidden behind the Lebanese population. Let's look at an example that we identified a few weeks ago. This is a Russian-made DR-3 cruise missile hidden inside of a home. The IDF identified the terrorists making an opening in the building that exposed the missile. We are monitoring these activities, locating the weapons and eliminating them with precise intelligence-based strikes.
So, yeah, I mean, probably most of us already seen this video. They usually show this video before of an airstrike they're gonna do, or right after to justify it. And maybe right now I just wanted to show some videos from a case study from forensic architecture. This one especially is on Al-Ali hospital that was bombed, and at least 500 civilians died and 300 were injured, and the investigation was around the fact was an Israeli missile that destroyed the roof of the building, or was it was a misfired Hamas missile. And in the reports and in the animated video that you can find in their website, but they were actually showing how they used video evidence. They geolocated them and they used them to triangulate the actual position of the missiles. So why we showed these two videos? Well, because both videos are extensively using 3D simulations. although the intention and the intentionalities behind them are very different. And fun fact, also both videos were made in Blender, which it's right now like a tool that comes from basically was originally done from 3D animation, but it's very, very exploited now also in this new field. And yeah, the topic we want to talk about is a bit, it's exactly about simulation, and simulation especially in the media when we're talking about war and conflicts. And well, we know that simulations are very important in science. They are useful for scientific research. They are useful for illustrating scientific research. And as a matter of fact, it probably was just a matter of time that they would use also in contexts like the context of war by NGOs or like yeah, also IDF and so on. But yeah, maybe.
Which makes us come to our first project we want to talk about. We did it like every project, we had like different iterations of it. So Exploded Snapshot was one of our first iterations. We designed an installation in the classic fashion of research-based art, where we collected images, videos, documents, and presented them in a way that it looked like a forensic investigation. Some of them were like falsified, like we faked them. So in the picture that you see now is a simulation that we created in Unreal Engine that had a timestamp and was running in real time. And due to the fact that it was so politically loaded and it looked like a documentation and was contextualized of the killing of an academic in Gaza called Rifat al-Harir, which was partially true and like true documents and partially faked by us. People thought it was legit, but they didn't ask like how we created them and so on, just due to the context of how they were displayed. Yeah, they thought they were real. Even like the simulation in the real time, they thought it was a camera footage happening now. These are some footages that we have created. This is a video that, sorry, and it's lagging. 1, 2, 3, go. Is it going? Yes. It is a video that we created in Blender. We used an image as a source, as yeah, it's a fake open source investigation. These are other examples of videos that were in Unreal Engine that we were showing on the old TV. And also, the way that we created them, like in the process, we wanted to learn how to create fake documents, to know how that, what makes it look real and what does make it not look real. We also have, as I said, we contextualized the installation in the narration of the killing of Rifat al-Harir, who was an academic in Gaza and a poet. We have also created some deepfakes with the help of a colleague of us who is also here in the audience, Orhun.
If I must die, you must live to tell my story. To sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings, make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze, and bid no one farewell. Not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite. My kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope. Let it be a tale.
Yeah, it gives a bit of goosebumps, I think. We were very interested to understand what was going on in the beginning of the conflict and how this thing was expanding through the media in all its ways, like between real footage, fake footage, fake footage that was discovered afterwards that was fake, and also like how propaganda or like people were actually even using clearly fake stuff instead of social media, and how, yeah, it was like a very big context, and we wanted like kind of to take it all and also to understand it a bit. So.
In a further iteration, we had another installation that was more of a physical 3D diagram. It was an archive of the footages that we showed you prior. In a bit of more footage, we also looked into footage that was used in that time, like for example in the Ukraine war, and was used as misinformation. That was partially also like placed in the diagram. Our diagram was like you could navigate between photos and videos that were annotated by technique, publisher, channel, and claimed authenticity. And you could like move around like it was a projection mapping. You had like this distorted image in the middle, and they would unfold on scattered papers in the room that were like hung on that structure. And we intentionally used like transparent paper where like the image looks a bit grainy on it, and we wanted to get away from this like digital fear that we have, like from documents that are super digital that we are scared of, but then make it more tangible and be able to look around it. These are images of the installation. On the left side, you see like one of the footages that was used in the Ukraine war, which is originally actually an Arma 3 footage. It's a game, and it was interesting to see, like, when you take that video from that game, what do you do to make it more realistic in that sense? Do you want to add something to that part?
I think it was quite accurate.
Okay.
The following thing. So, like, we're gonna briefly talk also about the iteration that came after, and this iteration was like inspired by another video from IDF that was like pretty intense to us, and I think also this one is really, really famous, and it's showing a render of the Al-Shifa hospital and showing the tunnels of Hamas under it, and actually also an headquarters. A few weeks later, the hospital was bombed, as we know. And we were like asking ourselves, wow, okay, like this is like, okay, there's written that is an illustration, but it also looks something very big. Maybe we should also look a bit more into what is IDF actually doing, what kind of technology they're implying, what kind of remote sensing algorithm, maybe intelligence. Can we find stuff about it? There were at the time a lot of articles, a lot of like hysteria and the obsession about these tunnels, but not so much information about the actual technological tools or like things that were used. There were some reference about LiDAR scans, but actually we couldn't find much. And usually, I guess this is the case in a conflict, because also for like they probably say it's classified material and so on. So we were left again just with a lot of simulations, a lot of video illustrating what they think they would find, and mass destruction, as we know. And so again, we were kind of like, we thought to do like another kind of speculative design work also in this case. And we were curious in this case also to use the static that we've seen so far that also IDF was using. And we created an algorithm in a real engine to generate tunnels. We gave some rules in order to kind of simulate a bit the terrain under Gaza. So in some places it was easier to build tunnel, in other less. And we took maps from IDF where you have entry point and exit point of the tunnels. And so then after we kind of took like the statics a little bit, they used like satellite imagery followed by transition into 3D visualization. Often there's a wireframe afterwards, and so on. And this is like some render examples of like some of the final results of what we did, and in our second we're gonna play a video. Maybe before the video, I just wanted to say something more in case we don't have time after. And it's like that, I really like what you said, and I think that is like using simulation and 3D simulation in this environment is really complicated and difficult. And we were also kind of we're looking through our thesis a lot on forensic architecture and what they're doing, and we came up to the conclusion that they kind of maybe somehow with the methodologies and tool bring some kind of novelty. They actually managed to create some interesting case studies and create stuff. And they also somehow build methods that then can be used by other NGOs or other like people making actual visual investigation. However, then there's a third product, and this is like a cosmetic product. So there's a very, very precise decision that they do in the design of the stuff they show. And I think, though, that it's basically impossible not to do that. Like in the moment in which you're like addressing institutional truth and saying that you want to counter that, still you have to kind of bring maybe images and content that, again, kind of states another kind of institutional truth or like authority. And this is always coming, when it comes through technology and simulation, it's like there's always attempt to mime scientific authority. So I have the feeling also that when we talk about this, we also have to think that there is like this aesthetic, very strong aesthetic problem in the moment in which we try to build something that is an evidence in the realm of images. And apparently it's still very problematic to address this and to find solution to this. And we wanted to finish with this video, and thank you.
We researched how war is reported today. What methods are used to display what is happening? We aim to examine and critically assess images that claim to show objective truth, questioning their falsifiability, and exploring why and how we trust them. When something purports to display matters of fact, it carries moral and ethical implications. The notion of truth is intrinsically linked to ideas of responsibility, righteousness, and, in extreme cases, good and evil. War images often fall short of conveying the true horror of conflict. Susan Sontag, in her critical analysis of war photography, argues that these images frequently serve as ideological instruments, malleable and open to exploitation by various parties. Rather than providing an unfiltered window into the realities of war, they become tools in shaping narratives and influencing public perception. With the advancement of technology, falsifying realistic imagery has become easier. Simultaneously, satellites, scanners, and algorithms now provide previously unattainable data, enabling us to present objective truth through simulations. However, those who control these methods wield the power to determine who is right and who is wrong. The issue is no longer about trusting what we see, it's about how certain images spark our imagination. The frantic search for tunnels, the desperate need to hide and preserve them, or to destroy them entirely, regardless of which side we're on, has transformed these tunnels into strange, living entities, constantly growing and expanding beneath the surface. Are they a threat? Or a symbol of resistance? They continue to grow, both in physical presence and symbolic significance. The technology used by the IDF to expose them only adds to their mystique. These tunnels defy scientific explanation. They slip through the cracks of logic and reason, expanding precisely because of the attention they receive. The more we try to capture or eliminate them, the more they grow, feeding on the very efforts to understand them. The technologies shaping truth have become tools of manipulation, with each side weaponizing images to condemn their opponents while asserting their own righteousness. In our work, we've collected these images and constructed a virtual set where fear, intention, and hope collide, playing out like emotions on a stage. Within this digital diorama, the potential for meaning deepens, and what once seemed certain begins to unravel. The truth of these images is no longer paramount, rather, it's their power to stir us, to evoke something far beyond facts, that matters. Are we witnessing a performance with countless possible endings, each bearing the weight of conflict and resolution? Our aim is to peel back the layers of this stage, revealing the intentions of those who craft these intelligent images in their quest to shape our beliefs.
I know we're so far beyond time, but we have one last note, which is actually a research that was published 1 week ago that is super relevant to the topic right now. And it was done by a couple of visual investigators and journals. Just like the title shows, they have investigated all the footage that the IDF published on social media after October 7th and did something called asset forensics, which sounds so cool. And yeah, they have taken images out of that and did kind of reverse image search. In order to find the original assets that were used and to showcase that this is an example, but also they did like interviews with actually IDF soldiers, finding out how, like for them, how it was important to show like aesthetically, like that they look cool kind of. They had like something called After Effects Lab and they used Blender for these videos. And in this video specifically, you also see like the Scottish Maritime museum, how this was like a photogrammetry of that museum, but somehow assets from that museum were all over the IDF videos. And it also shows you how this like aesthetic is being so weaponized in a way, and also how it delegitimizes other forensic investigations by using a very similar aesthetic.
Yeah, basically, I think you also it is like they use the same colors that forensic architecture uses, white, black, and red, and the same kind of aesthetic. And when they say in the interview that they have to look cool, I think also what they try to say, it's like that they want to take the same authority that this kind of images and the simulation have right now. Yeah, I think this is everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Engy and Fritz. Federico. I'll open up the round for more questions if you have, short ones. No questions? Okay, all the way in the back.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I immediately had to think of Jean Baudrillard speaking about the Gulf War didn't take place in 1991. And it seems then, I mean, technology has improved, but you're suggesting that the belief of people or the trust of people in imagery has not changed over the years. Is that what you're arguing? Because I guess scholars would always admit that you cannot trust images; they are not representing the real, etc., etc. So, what is your take on that? Because it's also a different context in which you present those images now.
So you're saying that. I'm not sure I heard very well the question though. Like, can you?
So basically, you're questioning the reality of the representation in regard to what is represented, and has the quality of that distrust or that simulation changed over the last 30 years because of the technological innovations? Do you see there's a different quality now with the help of game engines, for example, or AI, in regard to manipulating digital image or video image back in the days?
Like, for sure is hundreds times easier. Like we as a student try to use these tools, and we manage in 1 week and a half to make like a bunch of Gaza views and some AI content and algorithm to simulate tunnels and stuff like this. So for sure, this thing has become way simpler. And the point is that, I think an interesting thing is that the technologies that we used are technology created for entertainment, to make video games, to make animated video like Blender or stuff like this. And the same tool, because they're very easy entry-level tools somehow, and at the same time you can really adapt them to whatever you want to do. They became also kind of like tools very used in the counter-forensic environment, in the intelligence press environment, however it is called. And so, there are still reports, but everyone is trying to do this right now because this is maybe more moving, this is more authoritative right now. And the point is, I think a lot of people do research on it, they do stuff, but the point is I think psychologically, in the way we see this kind of images, we still we're kind of not ready to understand what is right, what is wrong. And as a matter of fact, I think IDF knows that, and they show stuff in that aesthetic, and they have the control of some kind of media help to do that. And this thing, even though now we know that maybe under Al-Shifa there were no tunnels and stuff like that, these things retarded any kind of counteraction that could have happened before, and created misinformation. And I think that's it's very difficult to.
I think we also are not claiming that aesthetics and images weren't problematic throughout time. They were always problematic, and truth and aesthetics have always had to do, had a connection to each other, and misinformation was there in the, has always been there. In fact, we always started our presentation with a painting of the raft of Medusa, and different war images, natural signs, depictions of DNA, and so on. We always claim that truth and aesthetics have something to do with each other. But yeah, the fact that it's so easy to create images now, we think that visual specialists have to be more, because it's so easy to be tricked by those images now, especially in an age of AI where you could generate a video like that, and to be honest, we can all fall into the trap. Is this actually AI generated? Because even if I look at AI videos all the time, sometimes I really can't differentiate. So yeah, it kind of becomes problematic.
Any more questions?
Just to follow up, do you think that will lead to less image? No, that this tendency that the image creation has become so easy that it will lead to less images as a signifier for something that is true, in media, in representation, in political struggle, and so on.
Honestly, I don't know. I have the feeling that it's not going to happen soon, because it's such a magical tool. You can create very relatable things and very relatable stories. You can make narration on that and stuff like that. So it's I don't see this disappearing anytime soon. Although I think it might be very interesting to understand how to address the problem of facts, also maybe more from, I don't know how to call it, but maybe an aesthetic perspective. Is there another way in which we can actually quicker understand who did these images, how, and all this stuff before? Maybe, hopefully there's going to be something like this at a certain point, I don't know.
Okay.
So we're now going to open this up to discussion. You can ask any of the presenters any question that you have. So if anybody has a question right away, we can get started.
First of all, thank you to all of you. And I kind of want to ask all of you, because as we move into this new reality of like post-truth, with all these aesthetics being weaponized, it feels quite a natural defense mechanism to start being ideologically nihilistic and sort of like politically non-binary, because you're confused. And confusion seems to be the best weapon against resilience and against your fighting back to the enemy. So the question is, how do we get out of this?
Who wants to answer this one?
Who wants to start? Yeah. I mean, I guess I can try. I'm not sure. First of all, I think you've put your finger exactly. I like how you phrased it, and as sad as it makes me, but I really hear you. Yeah, I really hear you. And I think maybe that's one thing when you were talking, or to this question over here, it's not just the ability to manipulate images and manipulate the facts. It's also the ecosystem in which we live, the information ecosystem, which, like you're saying, it's so muddled, mixed, contradicted, conflicted, and overwhelming that whether an image is real or not, you just don't know if you can trust the source. And if you see something today, you're sure you're going to see something in the other direction, tomorrow, right? So I think that's part of the confusion. I don't think that is an accident. I mean, I think there are lots of power holders, if I can use a very abstract term, who benefit from confusion, because exactly what you say, it sows there's apathy, or perhaps you feel overwhelmed and don't engage. So what the answer is, I don't know. What I would say and hope is, I think one is we need more tools to decipher and identify disinformation and false information. Maybe it's forensic tools, which some exist. I think you mentioned some tools that are out there. I'll make a little plug, because I know they need funding for, it's a plug-in, actually, a plug-in called InVid. It's very, very good. It's a nice, excellent way to help verify. So we need more tools that will make it easier for you, not you personally, but for us, to verify content. We need more organizations. I mentioned Citizen Lab, but there are many, many others who are engaged on this issue and who are trusted. And then eventually, we would say that we can rely, on them. And we need resilience. We need to be digitally resilient, because I totally hear you. It's a tough task, I don't know. There's some.
Yeah, thank you for answering first. And maybe adding to that, I think I also feel like a lot of this confusion is also strategic confusion by people who benefit from us being confused, or like people, organizations, states. And I think it's important to develop a kind of literacy and a strategic also way of dealing with when do you look at what and to which purpose. So for example, I would not use social media for information. Maybe it's interesting for entertainment. It's also, of course, important to get an emotional side of things. But you could also listen to audio documentations, for example, and they would not throw images at you, but you would also get maybe a different understanding. So maybe decide for yourself what kind of information or what kind of sites of information you can get from what source, and then trust the sources that are kind of deeply embedded in also different structures. So it's not one single person posting something, but more if it's a network, if they have collaborators, if you can see this is like bigger picture of bigger people building up things that's maybe more trustworthy than just something popping up on its own. So yeah, looking at the structures of how things are networked.
I think actually it's this very question that made us like go into that topic so much, because we ourselves were so confused and we didn't know like how to navigate through all those social medias, articles and so on. And so we looked into visual investigation, and I mean, now I lost my thread. It will come back.
While the thought is coming, maybe like I just want to add two things, and the first one is that the thing that gave me more hope so far from among the stuff I've seen is like the way Bellingcat does some stuff as an organization, like they're like 3 people coming together and they have like tutorials that teach you how to understand if something is fake or not. In case of AI, they have tutorial to learn to do cartography stuff to find and make some investigation. And I think that, and they have a very cool Discord channel in which sometimes they solve cases they manage, and you can see everything and everyone helping each other on the Discord channel. And I think the point here, it's at the moment not so much the fact that they actually finding facts, but the point that it's an amazing way to get a literacy about this problem of images of every kind and like misinformation and everything. And I think it's a very interesting experiment because it takes a bit this form of like what you can find in Reddit already in these small communities, and I think it works interestingly well. Yeah, maybe that is a thing to look at too.
It came back to me, and it was like basically, since we looked into a lot of visual investigative institutions, we came across that one case study, which was El-Ahli hospital bombing, where like all of these institutions had completely different outcomes. So what do you do in that case? And completely different methodologies, and you follow the methodologies. It makes sense in the transparent way. I think that's why we think like these methodologies, like more people should like learn how to do them, because to follow it is something, but to deconstruct it and actually try it and see if it actually makes sense is something else. Yeah, in that case, like transparency, the more transparent the methodologies are and that you can replicate it, then and you end up finding out the same outcome, and it makes more sense, I guess, at least for us. And yeah, I also agree a lot with what Federico said.
One thing, I mean, there is a growing establishment of protocols on how to do this work, right? And the one document, I mean, Bellingcat has produced a lot of material, others have, and I would point people to something called the Berkeley Protocol, which is, I think, the best crafted guide to how to conduct open source research. How to discover, how to preserve, how to verify, and it lays it out, right? So when you are trying to assess whether you believe the different El-Ahli reports, you know, you can reference the Berkeley Protocol. And then just linking to something that Anna said before is courts, because you know, increasingly visual material are being used in courts, and we are seeing, you know, videos that show the police beating somebody up at a protest, for example, you know, is being used. They are being accepted as evidence. It's different if you submit it as evidence than if it's accepted as evidence. But what we still don't have enough of, there's room for growth, is in the analysis, right? Because it's very different if you have a video, a judge can assess that the video is part of, points towards the commission of a crime, but it's different if they were assessing the different al-Ahli reports. And so like a forensic architecture report or a Bellingcat report or a human rights report. And judges don't always have the data literacy to be able to make that. So there's actually a guide. The people who produced the Berkeley Protocol about a year ago published a guide for judges and are doing trainings for judges so they can better assess the value of this evidence.
Hi, thank you. I have a question that's sort of along similar lines, but less about the authority of one image, but more about the quantity. For example, Anna, you mentioned the Border Violence Monitoring Network that a few years ago published the Black Book of Pushbacks that had thousands of testimonies recorded that were mostly done by individual NGOs, independent NGOs that had been compiled over the course of years throughout, like, the border with the Evros River, but also throughout the Balkans. And also in Berlin, there's the Syrian archive, the Ukrainian archive, the Yemeni archive that take this mass of video footage and organize it. And so all of you have spoken about the issue of verification or the authority of image testimony, video testimony. But I guess my question is more about the volume. It's less about quality, but more about the quantity of footage. For example, in Palestine is a great example of this, that people are self-representing. And Federico, you mentioned Susan Sontag, who talks about how the war photographer makes the narrative by what they encompass. But if somebody is recording themselves and self-publishing what is happening to them, to me that flips the dynamic completely. And it seems to me like the landscape has shifted in a way where it's no longer big institutes like Human Rights Watch that are able to keep up with this mass of information about these war crimes and human rights crimes that are happening.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So maybe I can start by pointing out the work of Mnemonic. I mean, you might be familiar with them because they also are part of the Syrian archive, but they are developing a new infrastructure for saving potential evidence from social media and saving also the metadata and making it available for future case studies. So it's not that they have particular cases they want to follow on, like, for example, forensic architecture. So they have special cases that they investigate. They would not collect everything on a subject. So that's what they would do. And they would also try to preserve the material, make it available. And that's very interesting and also important work because it's like below the level of making it visible for someone, but actually just saving it before it's taken down from platforms because of censorship. Because also that's an issue that a lot of this material is violent. It contains violent imagery, and it's often taken down by the content moderations of platforms. For people not to have it seen for obvious reasons, but often that could be potential evidence in case studies like years on. So they are doing this work, and like for me personally, when I got into this topic, for me it was helpful to kind of focus on this small data approach to say, okay, let's see how we can also follow on singular stories and get, via following singular stories, also an understanding of the whole bigger situation, because you can easily also get lost in all these cases and also the destinies of people that are always involved in this material. So I think it's also important to decide at one point how far you can go in doing research on that or dealing with that, and what is your personal approach to dealing with the situation you're describing.
In terms of the flood of data, for me as an investigator, I think it's great because it's information. I mean, it's more access to understanding what's going on. Now, there's a challenge, right? Because it's overwhelming, and you have to obtain it and sift through it. That's where Mnemonic's project is so genius, because they basically, starting with the Syria archives, they scrape every video. And I remember the head of Mnemonic, Hadi Al-Khadi, he said, there's more video minutes uploaded to social media of the Syria war than the war itself. All right, and so Syria was probably the first that could claim that, and that's incredible evidence. You know, there's remarkable evidence, and they were ahead of the curve to do it. Now they do Yemen, Ukraine, I think, and other archives. But so it's hard. You have to then process vast amounts of data, right? And we don't all have, NGOs don't have the computing power or, the tools always to do it. So that's where we need to get, coming back to your question, that's another thing we need to keep working on to take advantage of all that data. Obviously AI helps, right?
Yeah, maybe I just wanted to add that this is like more something like my opinion in this, but I have the feeling that like when we're talking about like this kind of evidence that you were talking about, it's a bit different from the kind of like simulated evidence that is mostly being used in these cases, because at least this kind of evidence comes like in play in a moment in which, as we saw, like something happens somewhere, an explosion, people are killed, and both sides are claiming, hey, it was you, no, it was you. Hey, actually, I have had evidence showing that you did that and stuff like this. And in that moment, like this kind of simulations are like, I would say like a kind of like they are presented as they bear some scientific authority, and so I think they play in a very different way, and they kind of are not interested in the witness. So it's like also like a weird cold image. This is like how I see it sometimes, and I'm not sure it's a right way to see it, but I got the feeling that it's like directly put into another level, and they used to justify also like this huge mass of footage that we see also in social media, and the people do showing actually what is also really happening.
Any final questions? Oh, right here.
Yeah, maybe this ties in really nicely, because I wanted to ask this question earlier to you. And now that we kind of saw this kind of layer of manufacturing of supposedly realistic footage, combined with like this notion of like a flow of not even data, but more kind of like in this form of content, coming from a perspective of like a consumer, and then kind of switching the perspective to you as like an NGO, kind of trying to move people to create content that via like public opinion motivates leaders and like political figures to take action on political conflicts like these. How do you kind of change your behavior in terms of creating this sort of content when, although you could kind of use every possible great tool and like perfect design choices and whatever to create the most beautiful content, or like the most informative and moving content, that might just be kind of lowered in its perceptions by all of the other content that's out there. So do you focus your energy, your effort of like being an NGO and trying to kind of get your voice heard to different realms of like political discourse, where it's just like talking to leaders more directly and less going through the public discourse where there's just like this flood of content?
I mean, I don't have a good answer, but one way I would get at it is to know your audience. And so in every project, every report, every effort has a goal. It has the long-term goal, which is end torture in X country, but you have feasible goals before that which will head you in that direction. And for that, you have your audiences. So whatever you're preparing and producing needs to have that audience in mind. And maybe then that's a question of platform. So you want to reach younger people, you go to TikTok. You want to reach older people, you, I don't know, go to Facebook. And then the way in which you will present the material. I mean, I think that's how we broke apart the thinking. So there's no formula, right? Maybe it's more of an art than a science sometimes. But the more you know where you want to go, the better you can make your decisions. I don't know if that really answers your question, but like over the years, you mean?
In terms of like focusing on like not the broader public, but more like direct.
Well, if anything, I would say it's shifted more to the public, at least for Human Rights Watch and Amnesty, which I'm most familiar with. They used to be more, Human Rights Watch more than Amnesty, right? Amnesty is more of a movement-based organization, and Human Rights Watch is more of a think tank type organization, right? Like you can't be a member of Human Rights Watch really, at all. So at least at Human Rights Watch, the target was almost always policymakers. Policymakers and media to help spread the message. And over the last 5 to 10 years, it has shifted more to trying to influence public opinion. Amnesty was always more in that direction. But I think there's a recognition because we have the tools now and we can reach the public that we need to try and speak to people as well and change views. We're obviously having great success.
I have also a comment to make on what was just said. I think at the end of the day, we all know, and whoever is watching, they will retrieve the information that they want to retrieve, right? And a good example that came to mind was I just remembering it gets me a bit chills. But yeah, it was this one video from a mom in the West Bank who had just found out that her son was martyred. And, her reaction was very, the way she spoke about it was in a very honorable way of, my son is a martyr, all the good things that are associated with being a martyr in Islam. And then I go to the comments and I see how I assume a Zionist person, but definitely an Israeli person, was commenting on it. Even though it's the same exact source, both sides are watching. The video is not altered, nothing. But one is seeing it, as, my son is a martyr, may he rest easy, and so on. And then the other person, they hear it, do you see? The way they want to portray their sons, and they just want them to die. They want them to be born to die. They want them to go off and kill all these people. And and it's just something that I think no matter how, source checking is so important when it comes to all these evidences we're trying to put forward, but you have, there's so many factors that one needs to keep in mind with just who the audience is, and you can't really beat fascism also with just altering images, and I feel like it's there's a lot at play.
Thank you. I guess it was more of a comment than a question, but you guys can also answer if it brought thoughts to you.
Algorithm support boosts that. I'll algorithm hyperpowers that, right? Because you just get fed one, you get pushed into your box.
Any additional questions, comments too?
I'm just going to bounce exactly on what you said last. There has been some attempts at regulation in the EU especially, which aim to force platforms to show their algorithm, to understand how consumers of social media get the feed they do. Do you think that if this were to be applied, this will actually result in either us understanding that there's been some manipulation at play or some dishonest practices, or on the other hand, will force, or in parallel, will force platforms to actually go for a more potentially less antagonistic approach? Or is social media fundamentally leading to antagonistic discussions on war crimes and conflict?
I mean, you know the history of Facebook, for example. It was made as a kind of checking out people that went to your school, and you know where we ended up with social media now. So I think this is like this rapid development of something that was more private way of communication to this social media taking up everything else in the internet. So like children using TikTok to do research on their homework, for example. So I think this is like a development that is not in that sense controllable by laying open the algorithms, though I think that is an important step, and also an important step to get governments to realize on how regulation should work on that realm. Because I think right now we don't understand enough to see what kind of regulation we would need, but we need to understand more how the algorithms work and what content is shown to whom under what criteria to then actually regulate more. That's maybe my guess to that.
I wanted to say something also, like maybe merging two, but it just came to me that I also feel like sometimes we forget about like what is important, that it's also not always important to find out like what is the truth, who actually bombed the Al-Ahli hospital, and we forget about the people that are actually dying there. Not about like, because that's also part of it, like to be so blinded by what is actually happening and focusing on the systemic way of looking at it, which is, to kind of deconstruct these ways, our system basically, these infrastructures, these algorithms. I think we have a long way to go in that, I think. And like our social media platforms are not helping that, but I'm for sure like optimistic in that it's happening slowly.
We have a question in the back. Thanks, Engy.
Yes. I have a question regarding what we have just been talking about, and it's more a question that I want to ask the experts what your personal belief is, because we've been talking about institutions so much. Definitely when we see things like war unfolding in social media, there is a strong argument to be made that the platforms are partially at fault because they're definitely monetizing that for their own profits. And I think what we've seen in the past decade is that some of the platforms did construct their platforms in a way that harmful conversation has been provoked just to provoke more conversation on the platform and keep the people there. So there's on the one hand a strong argument to be made that the platforms are held to be accountable for what happens on them, which would mean we need regulations. and strong institutions to regulate those platforms. But that also, on the other hand, brings a fear that if we allow a platform to be regulated by, for example, the EU, then the EU would have the possibility to use the platform for their agenda. And then it's the question, do we trust the big political institutions that we have? And do we rather try to build platforms on our own that are decentralized? And I wanted to ask where you see the future.
I'm definitely outside of my comfort zone here. I mean, I'm not an expert on tech policy, right? And I think you're asking about that. I would just say I totally agree with the point, I think, behind your question, and you referenced it as well, the urgency of regulating the tech sector. There's just no question. And, it's hard because the technology is changing very fast. So, politicians, lawmakers, policymakers are always behind. I don't know how long it was when cars were, popularized before seatbelt laws became, ingrained. And so we're always running behind. And the urgency is very, very high. Right? And, what that will look like exactly, I know there's the EU AI Act, which I think is a step in the right direction, right? It's not there. The EU has been, I think, further ahead than certainly the United States. And of course, you have to remember these tech companies are incredibly powerful, right? They're like stupendously wealthy. They engage in high levels of lobbying. Also in Brussels and in Berlin and certainly Washington. I mean, you see them in the Oval Office, shoulder to shoulder with the head of state. So the challenge is very, very serious, right? But that doesn't mean, that means we have to try even more. And the regulation is critical. I mean, it's almost existential.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Yeah.
We have a whole bunch. There was one over here. We're going to start with this gentleman first.
Okay. I did have a question, but now maybe it turned more into a comment, since you kind of took it before me. But on this question of regulation or like how to deal with these platforms, I think it is in one sense it's just like kind of catching up and things are moving too fast and stuff like that. But I think it's also in some way an issue of recognizing these platforms for what they are. And this is, for example, when it comes to regulation, a big issue where like something like Meta would say, we are a platform that just provides a service of spreading content. And it's very different if you recognize them as like a editorial service, for example, when very different like legal frameworks apply. And I think this conversation is kind of essential to also what you were discussing earlier, like, okay, you see the same information presented in very different ways through this kind of, these infrastructural conditions, I think what you called them, and you kind of have to do the work of like engaging what these infrastructures are actually doing, rather than like getting, this is my personal opinion, getting a bit taken up by this general narrative of it's like, it's going so fast, we have to like, we can't understand what's going on. But this is maybe a side note, but since you were asking about like maybe decentralization, I think also open source has been like mentioned a couple times, and I think this is a principle that could lead to maybe more emancipation on the side of the citizen or customer. And like the idea of like being able to look into the source code or something like that is something that would be very scary to a platform like Meta, I guess. But I just wanted to underline like decentralization, I think also transparency. These are also commitments that you, I think, mentioned earlier. Maybe this would be my personal comment on what I think would could be a way forward.
Do you guys have any comments?
I mean, just to say, because we're sitting in the TU, it's appropriate that we need researchers and investigators, if they're journalists or human rights researchers, with technical skills, right? Who will examine the code or the outcomes and be able to identify issues and make good proposals. And this exists, but we need more,
Thank you. There was a question also by...
So my question is kind of about coming back to this idea of like constructed truth and like trying to understand where these like what to trust essentially, and it's basically like, is this something that is new? Like we have like the AI stuff that is being brought out, all this like constructed information, but like is this not something that we should be pushing back also onto older forms of media that we were trusting in the past to try and like analyze like not expectation but like intention with that, and so yeah.
If I understood correctly, in my opinion, I think like constructed truth has always been there. There's this example that I like to mention, that I was looking into like ancient Egyptian drawings on the walls, and they depicted Kingdom of Kush in a very specific way. And we also took from the ancient Egyptians how they lived and did a lot of things. They documented it all on the walls, but we sometimes forget that it's like also who is writing on the walls is important. And due to the fact that it was kind of a government actually that was depicting how the life was and so on, we forget that it's also not all correct. So like depictions of another culture in that sense was incorrect. It was also a constructed truth. And I don't remember the last part of the question, but like I just wanted to like mention this, like it has been forever. We always combine aesthetics with truth and try to manipulate it all the time, I feel like.
I mean, the whole idea of evidence is deeply rooted in rhetorics. So it has this, since the antique, the background of telling things in a way that people would think they see them by themselves. So it's always this practice of narratology, or building an image, making a picture with a lot of details, for example, or making it very vivid or movable. So there are a lot of different strategies throughout history to create this effect. And the means, of course, have changed, and it's gone faster. So I would say maybe it's because you pointed also to more traditional media or different older techniques. Maybe it's also a way to take more time, maybe to wait longer until you would look into media or depictions of special events that took place, and you wait for maybe a week until a television program has picked it up or something. So you would like challenge this idea of having a rapid reaction to it, or having this this need to see it in real time, because I think that's kind of new, and that's also not natural, because it hasn't been that before. And that's maybe something also platforms are telling us, that it's possible to live real time and see real time events happening, but actually that's not the case. So you are not there, you are not at a different part of the globe, and just because you see an image of that doesn't give you a more closer relationship to what's happening there. So maybe dealing with these different timescales of also reception is maybe a way to challenge this platform appeal.
Thank you. I actually have a question next. It's to Fred, but also you guys can comment if you feel like you want to. And I wanted to ask specifically in human rights reporting how you guys deal with non-knowledge, and non-knowledge not in the sense of not knowing, but more in the sense of purposefully presenting unarticulated information, especially by state institutions and lawmakers, for example. Because a lot of the processes when it comes to human rights violations by the state or state-funded organizations are quite opaque. So how do you get transparency in these situations, and how can you produce something out of this non-knowledge? And secondly, do you think it could be used as a counter-practice as well? Or do you have any ideas when it comes to that? I mean, it also touches on you guys' work and yours also, Anna. But yeah, I was curious from a human rights perspective how you guys deal with it in reports, let's say, or when you're investigating.
I mean, I think when we're conducting an investigation and you get information from the state, how in whatever form, then first of all, you're already looking at it with a somewhat skeptical eye. But then you have to understand how they reach those conclusions. So you would look at the methodology. So are they data? Are they present? There's data on I don't know, the right to health, and you would want to see where that data came from, whether it was analyzed professionally or not, and then you give it weight in your assessment. All right. I think that's basically, and if there's no transparency, then you're less likely to trust it. I think is generally, but that's not unique for states. That would be for any evidence that you're gathering and trying to understand.
Do we have more questions from the audience? One more.
Third time's the charm.
Last one, maybe.
Sorry, me again. Yeah. No, I was just wondering if you guys think that one little step towards a solution or to address this crisis of trust, basically, could also be on the technical side of image making. I mean, you talked about forensics and so on, which is after the image, but the image making itself could level up its watermarking and so on. And do you guys, for example, work with imaging technology companies or so?
I mean, it's not on imaging technologies or companies, but I know that, for example, the images that were used in the investigation I was looking at, they were made in a way that you could easily geolocate them. For example, if you take a picture of a house or a street sign, people can easily verify where the image was taken than if you just photograph a tree, for example, or if you take a photo of yourself in front of a not very clear environment. But if it's easily recognizable where the photo was taken, it's more likely that it also can be proof at some point. So that's a strategy on the side of the motive of the image. But I'm not sure if I heard about also like apps that can be used that have more reliable metadata on the images. But I'm not an expert of that, so maybe you know more.
I mean, I know of one app, I think it's called Eyewitness to Atrocities. And so you take a photo here tonight and it basically water stamps it, right? Or time stamps it, and then it goes into a lock, what do you call it? What do the banks have? A vault. And then can be used better in court, right? Because the issue is also that you mentioned just chain of custody. Right, so that so there are apps that do that. I don't have details. I know that Adobe is working on this. They have a whole team that works on helping to identify false images. I don't know a lot about it, but at least yeah, there are efforts out there for sure. Yeah.
Alrighty, well, again, thank you all for your wonderful questions tonight. And that's going to conclude tonight's event.
Thank you to our guests, Dr. Anna Polze, Fred Abrams, Engy El-Shenawy, and Federico Zurani for sharing their insights and practices tonight. And special thanks to Deborah Amos and her students from Princeton University for making this collaboration possible.
And thank you to everyone here at New Practice for joining us in this conversation, and we invite you to continue the conversation by the bar.
Right.
Culo con caca.